What makes a good trophy list? Okay, right, so obviously good is subjective, but I think we can define good in this context by saying that completing the trophy list and getting the platinum trophy is satisfying. So any platinum trophy you found to be satisfying to get is a good platinum. Hello everyone, my name is Ethan, and I've been trophy hunting for over a decade now, and I have found plenty of trophy lists to be satisfying. I have also spent a few years wallowing in the muck getting stinky platinums, which by my definition are quick, easy, and unsatisfying. So I can tell you right now that just because a trophy list is easy doesn't inherently make it satisfying. Let's break this down, because I think we can define where our feelings of satisfaction come from. I think there are three aspects that define whether or not a trophy list is easy or hard. And I think they are skill difficulty, time commitment, and objective complexity. If a game asks you to complete sections on hard difficulties, complete objectives under time limits, or punishes small mistakes, then the list has a lot of skill difficulty. For many, this is the satisfaction. This is where it comes from. Being able to say you've conquered a truly difficult platinum is worth it. I feel this personally, but everyone has a different line drawn on what is challengingly difficult and what is nonsense. I think the challenge of the PS3 version of Shadow of the Colossus in its time attack mode is satisfying to conquer. But I'm never going to attempt to beat all of Super Meat Boy without getting hit. To me, that's nonsense. But to you, maybe not. We also have to look at how long of a commitment we need to make for the trophy list. These big, long RPGs that aren't hard but take 80 hours to mainline, they can be satisfying to platinum. Consequently, a game that takes 30 minutes to platinum will feel less so, but this is a line everyone draws too. When I platinumed Skyrim on PlayStation 3 back in the day, I spent over 300 hours, and you bet I felt proud of it back then. But when I looked and planned for the Dark Souls 2 platinum, I knew it would take over 2 playthroughs if I didn't make any mistakes, and that platinum is one of my favorites. A hard game that takes 2 hours is satisfying in one way, and an easy game that takes 50 is satisfying in another. Finally, the most important factor is the complexity of the list. This is definitely more contentious than difficulty or time. Simple lists will make people happy, and complicated lists also make people happy. If a list has missable trophies that will require another playthrough, it's a little bit more complex than if it didn't, obviously. And if a list has trophies that conflict with one another due to choices you have to make, causing you to have to efficiently plan out your playthroughs, then that's complexity. And if a list has you checking drop rates while you farm items, well then that's obviously complex. I remember building a spreadsheet specifically to track the item drops in platinuming Nier Replicant, and if I ever get around to the PS3 version, I'm going to use that same spreadsheet. How straightforward is the list? Do you need to worry about anything, or can you just casually play through the game at your pace and clean up after you roll credits? There are plenty of these big budget games that only ask that you just play through all of its content. Sony first-party titles tend to do these nowadays, and casual players end up platinuming them without even trying. So each of these three aspects make up whether or not we decide a platinum is easy or hard, and then through that, we find if we found it good. Okay, so let's look at some examples, and I'm going to be using this graph to give us a visual on how I rate trophy lists. Difficulty and complexity are subjective, obviously, but time I'm going to be measuring in about 10 hours for each of those marks there. For difficulty, quite simply, a 1 is a game where you press the X button a bunch until you win, and 10 is a game where you need to do an insanely hard difficult task upon insanely hard difficult task. As for complexity, games where you just have to do one thing and now you don't have to worry about anything else, that's a 1. And a 10 for those is having to do multiple playthroughs with different styles of play, having to keep track of collectibles and all sorts of different stuff. So both of these games are big, Western-style open-world RPGs, and they both want you to fully explore their worlds and complete sometimes long quests. In the case of Skyrim, difficulty isn't an issue because you're allowed to play on easy, and you really only have to pay attention to equipment to power you through fights. It does take a long time to finish though. You could just focus on quests and ignore anything that isn't required, and you will still end up spending over 80 hours. The list is a fair bit complex too, with multiple long-term project trophies to juggle, and some quests have optional outcomes that would lock access to a couple trophies. So overall, not a quick or easy platinum, but with some prep planning, It's a long but satisfying platinum. Cyberpunk 2077 is similar in many ways. It wants you to complete all of its quests, but they can be done on any difficulty. It's a shorter game overall, but it has a lot of small trophies that require specific loadouts and tactics that will eat up a lot of your time. The game's changed a fair bit over the years as of that 2.0 update, so many trophies now trigger in different situations. And due to the still somewhat buggy nature of the game, it's possible to still have some trophies not pop at all, or a bunch just decide that starting the game is a good enough time for them. Both of these actually happened to me on the same save file. Good game though, and a platinum that still feels cool to say that I have. For these types of open world RPGs, it's important to focus on overall objectives and storylines. The ideal game in this genre to me sprinkles in a few easy trophies for starting quest lines and awarding major trophies for completing them. This is what these games are all about, so these trophies should focus on them. For Japanese RPGs, let's take a look at a pair of Square Enix published games. Side quests are important in these types of games too, but they tend to be a little formulaic. I don't say that as a bad thing, by the way. I enjoy both of these games as content in a comfort food kind of way. Take Final Fantasy XIII for example. Its side content is sparse but specific, and usually leads to combat encounters that tend to end up requiring you to plan a character and paradigm loadout. Where it falters though is its item collecting trophy. This requires so much farming that it becomes the bulk of your playtime. A spreadsheet isn't enough. You need to efficiently plan your time out to avoid spending 50 hours in farming alone. Nier Replicant, on the other hand, is even more item collecting required, but it specifically gives you ample opportunity to grind and farm while progressing the story, not at the end. It does require a few playthroughs, though you skip the first half on subsequent runs, but once you get the hang of the world layout, it becomes a sprint. As an action RPG, it's pretty straightforward too, and you can easily pick up a strategy and stick with it for 90% of the game. These types of RPGs tend to really want you to delve into their systems. It's not uncommon to have a trophy require you to farm item drops off of enemies, and as long as the game gives you freedom to tackle it on your terms throughout the story, then to me that's more satisfying than simply having hard boss fight trophies. Action games. These tend to come in a few different flavors, so here we have a few that I like to call cinematic action games. These are games that want you to feel powerful, and while they don't make combat and set pieces trivial, they do want to heighten your adrenaline and carry you through its motions. Spider-Man 2 is a perfect example. Its combat is simple, but not brain dead. There's enough room for you to experiment, but ultimately they want you to feel like Spider-Man and will square your circle to make it work. It's also the kind of game where you just need to play through all of its content. There's no time trials or second playthroughs, just complete every quest and upgrade everything and you're good. Sonic Frontiers, the Sonic game that this channel is on the record for saying is the best Sonic game, is very similar to Spider-Man actually. Fill out the map at your pace and do all of the things. You don't even need to complete every challenge in the game's cyber levels. Both of these games are about expressing yourself through movement, and to me that defines this type of action game. These games should focus on completing overall objectives and have small trophies for minor challenges that nudge you to try a different approach. Next are the opposite kinds of action games. These have very specific trophies that require planning ahead to platinum efficiently. These are not games you can casually play through and platinum by happenstance. Dark Souls 2 is a notoriously difficult game, even by Souls-like standards, but its main difficulty comes in its permanence. If you needed to do something to get an item you need and you fail that, there's no going back. You'll have to save that for another playthrough. The game requires you to reach some pretty hidden areas and interact with NPCs in specific ways across 2.5 playthroughs at a minimum, so the game is long too. But, as I said before, this became one of my favorite platinum trophies. One of my favorite games of all time is Metal Gear Solid 3, and its trophy list is also complicated. There's a few different types of collectibles to go for, and you'll want a spreadsheet to keep track of them all. It's a rewarding experience, but you can easily make a mistake and miss something. At least you can reload an old save file, unlike Dark Souls. There's a couple differences in the trophy list between the old and the new HD ports, but ultimately it's the same experience. I personally enjoyed planning out a playthrough in games like these, but it's certainly not for everyone, I get it. As long as what a trophy has you planned for feels significant and important, then it feels worth it to me. It's very easy to fall into a trap where a game can force an entire playthrough just for one minor thing, because overall everything else lumps in with a previous playthrough. Fighting games. Okay, so these have a very unique place in trophy hunting. By nature, the games are hard for most players that aren't into the genre. There's a literal skill barrier for most people. Add in the online trophies these games tend to have, and you have players generally give up on them. Tekken 8, however, keeps it simple. In fact, the whole series keeps it simple. You barely need to play online, and you don't need to complete any difficult combo challenges. Just play the short story modes and marathon through the very small gameplay mechanic focused trophies. It's a solid list, and it lets you play as the characters you want and learn the game at your pace. On the harder side is Guilty Gear Xrd Sign. This is the first version of Xrd, by the way. Revelator 2 has its own trophy list, and it's even harder. And while its online trophies are simple, it does demand a lot from you offline. There's a few modes that require a good grasp on the mechanics. You'll need to actually be good at fighting games to platinum this. At least generally good. There's a mode where you need to go through hundreds of fights in order to fill out this hexagon grid, and you gotta repeat that over and over. It can easily become the bulk of your playtime. Ultimately, it's manageable, but you need to stay committed to seeing this platinum through to the end. A good fighting game trophy list does not require you to master every single character, nor should it require you to reach an extremely high online rank. It should focus on teaching gameplay mechanics and experimentation with a few characters. This is the type of genre where the trophy list should be a teaching tool to help promote confidence in new players. Video game collections. Okay, so collection trophy lists are interesting. Many collections split their trophy lists up so each game gets their own, but some just have a single list for the entire package. In these cases, its playtime can vary wildly, and every collection handles it differently. In the case of the recently released Doom plus Doom 2, you're tasked with beating every single game, and there's more than 2, as well as performing difficult challenges. Fortunately though, this is mitigated by allowing players to select the final level in each game or WOD, and enable God mode cheats to make every challenge trivial. It's a great collection overall, but it does require some planning and a keyboard to breeze through. In a similar vein is Sonic Origins. This is also a collection that requires you to roll credits in each game and also lets you level select to the end. There are some challenge modes, but ultimately are easy if you have some Sonic experience. Collections like these need to focus their trophy lists on having the player learn about each game's unique parts instead of simply wanting you to beat them. Neither collection was satisfying to me because I didn't need to beat each game the correct way, and there wasn't enough experimentation in the game's lists themselves. At the end of the day, players come to these collections to admire the individual games in them, so the trophy lists need to encourage examining the uniqueness in each game. Finally, multiplayer games. These can be tricky due to the obvious ephemeral nature of online servers and player sizes, but it's more complicated than that. These are games with social elements. You're probably playing these with friends, and the last thing you want to do is sidetrack to complete trophies. Concord is a very, very recent game, and its trophy list seems pretty good overall. I'm still playing through it. I hope to platinum it soon. It wants you to play as each character enough to get them to level 10 and to get 50 kills. This isn't much, and even the gameplay mechanic trophies are easy to come by naturally. Matches go by quick enough, and you're bound to have a few games where you personally perform really well. The Chronicles of Riddick: Assault on Dark Athena is a very old PlayStation 3 game and actually contains 2 single-player games and its own multiplayer mode. So putting that single-player stuff aside, the online trophies are insane for what they're asking of players. To put it simply, a game that knows it was never going to have a large player base or a long tail should not require you to win 1,000 matches or kill 10,000 opponents. On top of that, there are trophies that just don't say what they want you to do. One trophy's description is just literally the word boom. One day I hope to have this platinum, and one day it'll be I that says boom. Maybe. Online focus trophies should not have complicated trophy lists. They should not have a skill rank related trophy, and they should avoid putting player groups in situations where one player wants to mess around while the other players actually want to win. I'm mostly worried about servers being shuttered though, so to me any list that's easy to complete quickly is a good list for an online game. Okay, let's wrap this up. I wanted to make a short video on this subject, but I think there's a lot of room to expand here. So let me know in the comments below about some games you think have a good trophy list, and I'll check them out. I'd like to do deeper trophy analysis videos, so let's see how this one goes first. Like and subscribe and all that because it actually really helps out. Here on the channel we do a podcast reviewing movies based on video games, amongst other things, and we like to do live streams on games and stuff. We actually have a series where we play through a Pokemon ROM hack I made with Nuzlocke rules, so check that out if you'd like. And as always, bye!